picking it up from where Tumi landed, which is about how we work with you, our clients. So we want to talk about other stakeholders that will be involved in the typical core banking modernization journey. So leading that discussion, moderating the discussion would be Wale Abioye from Strategy and Customer Solution. So Wale is a partner at KPMG West Africa, specializing in strategy and customer solution within the advisory practice. Wale helps organizations reimagine how they serve their customers, from designing bold strategies to driving digital transformation. It leads West Africa's leading banking industry customer experience survey, BICS, capturing insight from over the 3,000 customers annually. Wale brings deep expertise in customer value, innovation, and change leadership. Please appreciate Wale. He will be coming up stage now. The next person that will be part of this panel discussion, Michelle Woga. Mrs. Mitchell is the Group Chief Experience Officer at UBA, where she leads development and implementation of customer experience strategies across the group. She is a highly accomplished customer experience professional with over 25 years of extensive banking and consulting experience, spanning business development, retail, corporate banking, branding, marketing, and communication, and customer experience, of course. She led UBA into its first ever top 5 ranking in the KPMG BICS assessment across all business segments. Michelle has helped shape experience-driven framework that address organizational impact, stakeholder communication, and change management. Please welcome Michelle. So the next person here that will be part of this discussion, that will be Mr. Bartholomew Okonkwo, is the Chief Information Officer at Fidelity with over 27 years of experience in managing IT operations and helping organizations create a digital economy that deliver valuable returns, product, service to customers. He has led and supported impactful digital initiatives across Africa and the United Kingdom. Blending operational insight with technology expertise, he has worked closely with different stakeholders in executing transformative and innovative digital initiatives that have enhanced core banking infrastructure, improved customer experience, and financial services. Please welcome Mr. Bartholomew. Then the next person on the panel will be Mr. Abraham Azegbe, who is the current head of global operation at Access Bank PLC, and is the chairman of the committee heads of bank operations, where he contributes to industry policy development. He also plays a central role in the several strategic initiatives at Access Bank, which includes merger with the Diamond Bank PLC and execution of the core banking system upgrade and integration across Nigeria and other African markets. His deep operational expertise and experience in managing stakeholder relationship at all levels have supported successful transition during major transformation efforts. He sits on the board of Access Bank Cameroon and Access Bank Mozambique, enhancing organization capability through structured change and stakeholder alignment. Please welcome Mr. Abraham. And the other person on the panel will be Mr. Okechukwu Nwoke, who currently serves as the Chief Information Officer at Stanbic IBTC PLC, and he leads enterprise-wide IT strategy covering governance, risk management, enterprise and technology architecture, and also security and technology operation. His role is central to aligning technology initiatives with business objectives, ensuring that IT systems support organizational agility and resilience during major transformation projects. His expertise supports effective stakeholder engagement, helping financial institutions manage internal and external impact areas, such as communication, awareness, training, and operational continuity during technology change. I will hand over to Wale Abioye, who will moderate this session. Thank you, Wale, and thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much, Joseph. All right, good afternoon, everyone. I guess one of the biggest themes that we've discussed today is that core banking modernization is not just about technology. It's really about people. So it's the impact on people. And when you look at people, it's not just customers and the impact on customers trying to navigate new systems. It's also employees who are trying to navigate new applications or new workflows within the organization, and even vendors as well. So over the next 30 minutes or thereabouts, we'll be exploring the impact on stakeholders and how, as banks or organizations, we can manage that whole process of core banking modernization. So let me start off with my first question. So I'll start with Bas. So Bas is an experienced technology practitioner. But Bas, if you look at it, we have different stakeholders, but it's arguable that maybe all of those stakeholders don't carry the same weight. From your perspective, who are the key stakeholders that should be managed very early on in the process?
Okay. Once again, my name is Bato Kumpo, and I'm very excited to be here. Thank you, KPMG, for giving me the platform. So, when you come to core banking change or transformation, a lot of us normally think it's all about technology, but it's really about the people. And when you want to start a core banking transformation, you need to start with a people plan. You look at the stakeholders. Number one is the frontline people. The people in operations, they tell us. Those that are in contact center that will be getting calls from customers, frustrated customers. So you need to ensure that this set of people are carried along in the whole change process, and you protect them because they face that like the soldiers in the war front. You know what I'm saying? Then the next set of people again you need to also look at is the customers. You need to, when you are transforming, you need to have customer mindset. You need to look at how that change impacts the customers. Because the customer is the one that makes sure that you are still in the business. So customer experience cannot be compromised in that transformation process. So you need to carry the customers along. Then the next set of people you need to also look at, like what has happened in the recent time in the industry. Look at your regulator. In as much as you are trying to transform, you are running at a neck-breaking speed. But you know that speed is not without control. So you need to align with compliance. You need to make sure that all the regulatory and operational controls are in place. So the regulator is your stakeholder. Then you now come to one of the greatest users of the technology in the transformation process. That's financial control. These are the guys that manage the ledger. And we know that in a lot of core banking projects, the ledger can go south. You'll be burdened with reconciliation issues. So you need to carry the finance guys along. Then when it comes to prioritize, you need to, in order of priority, you need to start with your customer first, customer-centric. Then the next, you need to look at your regulator. And then you come back to the frontline guys. Thank you.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. You know, you looked at Abraham at the beginning, so I thought you were going to prioritize people, prioritize the operations team. Okay, but since you've chosen customer, let's go to Michelle then. So Michelle, what do you do to get your customers on board early on in the process, and what are the risks if you don't do that?
Okay, thanks, Wale, and thanks to the KPMG team for anchoring this discussion. So, that question is a very interesting one. For anybody who chooses not to carry their customers on board, get ready to be the next viral sensation on social media. And that's real, right? And I mean, it escalates from that point. And we know on social media these days, sometimes it's your customers plus the ones that are not your customers, the bloggers that are trying to get visibility that will just tag you just because they know they're having issues. So that's a huge risk, and a lot of banks, are very apprehensive about that. So it goes without saying that you must carry your customers along. What I loved about the discussions that I was hearing earlier is that everybody was talking about it's about the customer, it's about the customer. A couple of years ago, it wasn't like that, right? So to hear people consciously, place the customer at the fore of any changes, business decisions, I think is a right decision, right? There's a lot of anxiety around any sort of changes. I know when we're having maintenance, just little maintenances at our bank, everybody panics. I panic, right? Because you really don't know what's going to happen. But the best that you can do is to be prepared, right? I don't think you can over communicate. There is some anxiety and some caution about how much communication should you send out there. We've had instances this year when on social media, some customers say, what's wrong with UB? You guys are always communicating, maintenance here, maintenance there, maintenance here. And, so the initial thought will be, don't say anything, hope that things go well. But you can't afford to do that. So you must let them know. Because I think that customers are quite understanding, right? As long as they are informed, as long as you carry them along, as long as you give them the right information, they are quite patient and will work with you, through your changes. Another thing for me that I think is really important with these big changes is to co-create with your customer. You will be surprised at how many people are willing to give you information and share their own experiences, let you know what their expectations are, so you can build that into your planning at the early stages, right? So I think that is something that maybe we don't do enough of, is to co-create with them and carry them along at the beginning of the journey, not just external customers, even internal as well, because it's the same thing with IT, and I'm sure Bath knows. IT has been thinking about doing an update. It's at the time of the update, they come to you and say, yeah, please, we need messaging. And I'm like, how? You know what I mean? How are we going to just like magically, get things right? Because there's not just one message. And that's what people don't understand. It's not just to say, oh, we're launching. You have to think about your pre-launch message. You got to think about your disruption message. You got to think about what happens when there are disruptions. How many times should you communicate? What should the format and the language of the messaging be? Because all that impacts how the customer, absorbs your messaging. So I think you really have to know that even your engagement and your communication with customers in and of itself is a strategy. It's not, you can't just wake up and decide, oh, I know everyone uses ChatGPT these days. Oh, I need to do a disruption message for this. Please give me the ideal messaging for it. You can't do that because every organization is different. Your customer base is different. So you need to understand who they are, the different segments, your micro segments, what do they want to hear? What are the things that you need to advise them about? And I mean, there's so many different ways that you can, really pull them into what you're doing at the moment.
All right, thank you very much. Brilliant. So more or less, in the same way that we would do user acceptance tests, more or less doing your customer tests or customer rehearsals as well, just before you go into the process. So Abraham, finally back to you. So your frontline team, they're more like the shock absorbers, if you like. They're the ones that customers see in the branches, and then of course the guys in operations. Now, how do you prepare your operations team for this journey? How do you prepare them technically? How do you prepare them even emotionally as well? Because you heard Wale say people die and and come back again. So how do you prepare them for those cycles that we almost know would happen?
Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you to the KPMG team for having me here. I think for me, I would say with the front line, it's actually largely about change management. And you have to be aware of the fine details of what that change entails. A lot of times it's easy to assume that the man who sits in Kituwenji, or somebody who sits in Maiduguri, or somebody who sits in Damaturu, or somebody who is in Elisha, far-flung parts of the country, appreciates what is going on at the center. And typically for the frontline guys, they function largely around standard procedures. So it then means that when we start this change process, we first have to start from looking at what are the standard operational manuals that they use. You want to be able to capture essentially all of those fine details in those manuals, because that is what a typical frontline officer would want to look at. What does the policy say? What does the process say? And with a lot of the technology changes that would happen, it may be an entirely new solution. So everything you've learned, even if you've been in the institution for the last 20 years, everything you've learned could just change because of these modernization that has taken place. So that is very critical. Another thing is we can't overemphasize the need to communicate largely. I think Michelle also alluded to that. Even as you communicate with customers, you have to communicate with your people internally. And those communications have to be one-on-one communications. You use platforms to communicate to them. You bring them into rooms where you have conversations. And, you also have to sort of allay those concerns and the fears, because you would have a lot of them who have doubts about whether or not this solution is the way to go and all. So you need to be able to deal with those issues. You also want to be able to have what we would call a business simulation that you would do with them over time. A lot of times for the guys in the front, the frontline guys, it's usually around how experienced they are. So the more experienced, the more seamless it is. Now, you give someone a new solution that is never used before. It's not the first day of we've gone live that person should begin to experience those applications and all those new approaches. So you want to be able to build into what it is they're doing a simulation process that almost basically accounts for everything they would normally do on a live environment. And so you'd find that there's a deliberate process that you have to walk them through. And that, of course, means that you have to think of all of the things that can possibly go wrong. Because a lot of times also, you've finished all of the trainings, you've done the simulations, and then come day one, something breaks. And the guys, the frontline officers, are almost helpless or clueless because we didn't anticipate this. So part of the process that you'd have to deal with would be simulating all the possible scenarios that could go wrong. You pull them together. What are the contingency planning that we have for each one of these scenarios that we've seen? And I think the more you do that, you begin to identify those gaps that can arise. And of course, you would have your FAQs that you continue to create for them as a living document, which means that every time something new happens, you put it up there. So it's largely around the end-to-end procedure for how you manage this change initiative. And I think if we do that well enough, we should at least minimize a lot of the hiccups that you would see upon go live. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ram. Very, very good insights. If I marry what you've said with what Michelle has said, it's a sort of approach that we will take where, in a sense, you look at your user personas or your employee personas as you plan your change management process. So the colleagues in Borno State, in Kaduna, maybe different sort of persona from those colleagues in places like Lagos or Abuja, for instance, and building all of those things. So a lot of operational discipline from your point. Bas, you left out one of your most important stakeholders at the beginning, your vendors. So, so let me ask okay to talk about that, because during the core banking transition, it's almost like a marriage between the bank, your key partners, and then your vendors. Now, how do you create the co-ownership of the outcomes, particularly on the vendor side, who may be looking at the interaction as transactional? They just want to do their own bit of it and go away. But how do you get them to co-own the outcomes with the bank?
Thank you very much. Once again, good afternoon, everyone. I think I like the way you brought it back to me in terms of the vendor, so I'll take it. So from my own view, I think one of the important things to look at is contracting. And when I talk about contracting itself, I'm talking about flexible contracting, right? You'd agree with me today, in most cases, a vendor would like to eat their cake and have it, right? And apologies to the vendors in the room, apologies. But remember, we are partners. That's the most important thing you should define. Now, when we talk about flexible contracting, you ask yourself, what level of modularity do you want to have? Do you want to embark on what we call a modular contract approach? What does that clearly mean? It's saying, can I decouple some of the things I would want to do? So, for example, do I want to treat my core banking, my channels, separate? Why do I say that? I do not want either to be locked in with a vendor because I want to be able to respond to change as it will arise. Secondly, do I want to have a well-defined change request framework? And I'll tell you why. I'll bring it home a bit. We work in a very well-regulated environment. If I were to ask the audience, year to date, how many new circulars or how many new policies have been released by our regulators, you'd probably count them, right? Now imagine embarking on a project with a vendor that is so significant as a core banking transformation, and you do not even have any flexibility in your clauses. Think about it. We're talking open banking today. We might be talking about something different tomorrow. That's bringing it home. We also need to think and ask ourselves, it's always best you get an adaptive partner. And I use the word clearly, adaptive. Demonstrated adaptiveness. It's one thing to say you're adaptive. It's another thing to demonstrate it. And what am I saying? Someone who understands the terrain. Someone who has demonstrated how they are able to apply flexibility on how they respond to take you through that journey. That same person would understand your KPIs because they know jointly together, you've either created them together and they have a good understanding of the terrain. Thirdly, you want to have a very effective decision-making engine. Very important. And to achieve that, we shouldn't shy away from having what we call a joint governance. What am I saying? You have a steering committee where you bring in your vendors. Don't keep them outside. Bring them in. There are reasons why. There are conversations that will happen within those steering committees that can help you realign and either make you respond faster. You can also ask yourself, what level of agility do you want to adopt? How iterative do you want to be? Do you want to go big bang? As Wale said rightly, when I was coming in, I had my CE. Wale's my CE, had set a standard. I said I cannot go below that standard. You need to ask yourself, how iterative do you want to go? And lastly, to end it, we keep missing one part. Embed compliance from the word go. Never bring them in the middle or at the end because they help you guide through that vendor lifecycle management. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. So Bart, very quickly. Please go ahead. Please go ahead. You want to clap for him? Yeah, so Bart, at the beginning, you talked about change management. So maybe just break it down a bit more for our audience. What should be in your change management framework? What are those things, particularly for maybe people in the audience or listening who haven't gone through this or have had issues in the past? What should be in that change management approach?
Hello? Okay. There is something that is happening in the industry And that is a couple of core banking projects that probably have experienced a failure or maybe a hiccup. And what we need to know is it's not the code that breaks, it's the change management process. Because if you look at a lot of all these core banking systems we run in the industry, they are running in other parts of the world, in the biggest banks globally. So why are they not working here? So if you have a mismanaged change process, if that change process breaks, you have broken the customer experience. So, how do you handle this? When you want to make a change of this magnitude, a change or a transformation at this scale, because if you look at a core banking, it's not a nuclear reactor. It's a platform that enables you to, talk to a customer through various channels. So I see that as a process transformation. So you need to, first of all, start with a process mapping. You need to begin to break down the processes, department by department, function by function, product by product, and clearly define those processes. In a process transformation, a lot of processes might be altered, some might be changed in terms of sunsetting it. And remember that in that change management, you need to look at policies will change, roles will change, a couple of things will change. So you need to bring all those elements into play at the beginning. Then you now look at the frontline people, the operations guys. You need to build that change process or that process change with them, with those guys in focus. They need to be part of that change so that they will believe in the system. You don't just come and dump a technology on them. Because they are the ones that will face the customers. Have you faced an angry customer before? It can, so they are the ones that will face the customer. So they need to be part of the change process from the beginning.
Okay.
You
All right. Thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you. Let me quickly go to Abraham and then I'll come to Michelle. So you've done all of your simulations, you've prepared, it's go live day, and let's assume things go wrong. So how do you manage that? Or how do you prepare for crisis?
So I had said earlier on that as part of the change management process, you want to almost imagine everything that can go wrong. But we know it's humanly impossible to think up everything. But it puts you you are likelier to be able to handle when things go wrong if you've done your homework in that regard. So one of the things you would also need to do beyond preparing for the worst and trying to just recreate every possible scenario of things going wrong is you need to be able to create an excellent support system for the frontline guys. One of the things you should do is create a multifunctional or a multi-team command center, sort of, and open channels of communication between the frontline and that center, because there would be, and this center would be both technical and business functional heads or functional members who would be able to huddle together if a scenario that we didn't think of comes up. You have a combination of people who can throw ideas around very quickly and come up with solutions. So that's one of the things that you would need to do. Another thing you would also need to do when things go wrong is, and this is something that I think we don't do enough of a lot of times, is even empowering the frontline officers to take certain steps. Beyond the standard procedures that I had talked about earlier, you want to get to the point where if something is going wrong, you trust the judgment of the officer you've put on the front line to make certain calls. And if that is going to help solve the problem that the customer has to deal with, then the frontline officer is able to make those calls and deal with them. So you need to create some measure of lax for that frontline officer who is able to do that. And of course, I would go back to that communication bit again, because from my experience, that is one area where you can never get it wrong if you communicate and communicate and communicate again. And given that people are dispersed all over the world, all over the country, and every time you have to make these changes, you need to be able to reach out to them on very short notice to say, these are the things that we're going to do. Sometimes when these things go wrong, you find a solution, you change course. Now, changing that course needs to be communicated across board. And sometimes if you don't do that right, you may have changed it in Lagos, like you said, VI, Lagos guys have caught on. Well, the guy who sits in Ibadan has more or less shut down because there's no solution coming. So I think that's, for me, would be the things that we need to do. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. That's a very important one. So having support for the support people, as well. So that's important. So you've talked a lot about communications. Michelle has a very strong background in customer and communications. So Michelle, from a communications perspective, how do you manage crisis? So it's gone wrong. You've planned, you've prepared. So how do you manage crisis scenarios? Sorry, before your response, please, if you have any questions, you can scan the QR code. We'll take a couple of questions before we close.
Okay, thank you, Ali. Wow. I think that you should be prepared for the crisis, right? So that you're not having to manage the crisis, okay? One thing that I believe that is critical for customers is information. So ideally, your customer should be aware that you could be, do you understand what I'm saying? So they're not caught unawares. And I think that's where the biggest issue is I try to use my platform and it's not working. However, if in a situation like this core banking, because it's a huge change, if you're carrying the customer along every step of the way, and if you have the right monitoring, the right teams in place, you can tell that in an hour we will not be up. Do you understand what I'm saying? So you communicate to the customer and you let them know. For me, in situations like this, I think, again, because as you said, a lot of banks are preparing, and we are also preparing so there's a lot of conversations around what do you do, how do you, get yourself ready. And I believe that we must have what I would probably call like essential implementation and rescue packs, right? And you have a pack for almost every department in the organization. You've got a marketing pack. You've got the staff support pack, which now has for operations, for CFC, what do you do? What service recovery packages do you prepare so that, as Abraham said, in the event that there's an issue, they can recover, right? For customer support, same thing. Do you want to have a platform or a site where they can go and you're giving them real-time updates? You're carrying them along. A complaints channel. So rather than allowing them to go onto social media, you direct the traffic to a specific place. So you've communicated ahead of time. If you have any issues, please, communicate here. So I think for me, it's really making sure that you have that plan ready. You've got your communication and your messaging ready. You utilize your resources. So you have your team groups that have been set up, or your communication champions across the organization that are responsible for certain things. and that carry out the required communication for the different segments of customers. Because what I'll be expecting to do with a corporate client is completely different from what I would do with a retail banking client, right? So for corporate banking customers, the relationship managers, the regional heads, probably even the CEO should be prepared to engage with a big clientele. So you must have segmented your customers ahead of time and make sure that you're ready to engage them should there be any disruptions. The ideal thing for me, and somebody has to figure this one out, is when you're having these disruptions, give me an offline procedure, please, so that my customers can keep transacting. That is the ideal. So if any solutionist is out here that can figure that one out for us, I think that would be perfect.
But don't worry, just talk to
Thank
Ladi
you.
after the session. Okay. Someone has a question for you in the audience. So you talked about vendor relationships, but when they fail to deliver as expected, while still maintaining project objectives, controlling costs, how do you manage that when your vendors don't deliver?
Valid. And I think that's why it's important you break and take iterative steps. And you build milestones and you build what you call your critical success factors. It needs to be clear. And those are things you clearly engage, discuss, document, and agree on. It's very important because in many instances, you get into it and it could either mean a scope creep in terms of time. It couldn't be in terms of the quality of what's being delivered, right? And you find out you haven't put those clauses in there. So you need to ensure, and the vendor, I rather not use the word vendor because at a point in time, you become a partner, right? Because to do a core banking transformation program, you're no longer a vendor, but you're now a partner. So it means you and your partner must understand what are those critical success factors. And once it's defined and agreed on, you always have a measure to monitor and actually ensure that you are complying with it. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. One other question, and Bas, for you very quickly. What's the ideal duration for post go live support before full handover? So maybe Bas, and then just your perspectives. So for post go live, what's the ideal duration for getting support?
Okay. First of all, I wouldn't even envisage a post go live support because if you do your proper change management, I mean, you should be able to fix all the issues before you go live. But if it gets to that level, I don't think it should last more than 30 days.
Okay, what do you think? I'm sure there are different
It's
points
quite
of
aggressive,
view.
but you need to.
There are different points of view.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think without making it a debate, my view is when you run a program, before you get to post-live support, ensure you have a mechanism where you can transfer skills to your resources. Very important. Now, post-go-live support doesn't necessarily mean a death sentence. It typically means I will work with this partner through a certain period. I will stabilize, I will clean up, I will fix my environment, I will do knowledge transfer, and I will hand over. Typically, it depends on your environment and the complexity of the project. You could see some instances run, as Bart said, for 1 month. You could see some instances run for as long as 3 months. It depends on the complexity and your environment.
All right, thank you. So maybe just closing thoughts. We'll just take Michelle and then Abraham. Any closing thoughts?
I think that this is one of those changes that are important, and the banking industry cannot run away from it. I believe that this conversation we're having, as a lot of people said, is quite apt. Although for me, it's giving me a lot of anxiety, to be very honest, when I think about the scope and the planning that has to go into it, right? But it's something that we definitely have to do. And this session is giving us the right thoughts and equipping us with the right conversations to have at the relevant levels. So I will say that, if we're talking about stakeholder management, one, just make sure you start early. Start at the point of the thought, right? Even before the engagements with the partners have started and all of that. Internally, as an organization, it has to start there. And I think carrying people along very closely, if you have to do roadshows, so that people understand what you're doing. And I think make it fun. Make it fun. You know, I was thinking these days we have augmented reality, we've got virtual reality, you know, really make it an immersive experience for the entire organization. So it becomes a fun project that people are really looking forward to. And you can extend that to your customers as well, you know. So they're looking forward to it. And even if you do have disruption, they probably will make excuses for you and say, it's okay, so I've seen it, I've tasted it, I've felt it, you know, and I know how exciting it's going to be. So you want to keep that excitement, you know, in the air. And I believe it will support, it won't make things, 100% perfect, but at least it will support the transition in a very fair way.
All right, thank you. Abraham, 20 seconds.
Okay, so for me, it's for anyone who wants to get into, and I'm talking from the stakeholder management point of view and how you manage your front line, never overlook any fine detail. The very last detail must, even if it sounds very unlikely, it is important that we never overlook, because from experience, what you'd find is some of the things that have come up that we probably have pushed aside as inconsequential can be the big game changer for how well the execution of the project goes. So it's very important that we allow ourselves entertain all opinions, all views, take on whatever is coming through, and then see how that fits into the overall change framework that we're working with. And once we do that, and hopefully nothing should go wrong.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much. So start early, operational discipline, and then just keep all your stakeholders engaged throughout. All right, thank you very much. Please put your hands together for our panelists. It's been quite insightful.